Hello, this is Blakey Rat.
This is Francis.
Welcome to Robots in the News. We are going to do a commentary over the first half hour or so of Dear Esther, which is one of my favorite games slash non-games. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get it started.
Dear Esther, the morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck. I remembered nothing but water, stones in my belly and my shoes, threatening to drag me under to where only the most listless of creatures swim.
So, as you can tell by the fact that I remained quiet during that intro, I really like this game. I really like the acting and the dialogue in it. And I say game, but it's not really a game. It's like an interactive experience. What, are you laughing at the toilet?
No, I like how the first thing you look at is the really nasty brown toilet.
Well, okay.
Sorry, I can't
There's
take that
toilet
seriously.
in the game. Jesus. Man, it's serious business. How about the chemical symbol? That's pretty interesting. So, you're basically... It's kind of interesting in multiple ways. First of all, they never explain who you are or why you're here or what character you are, which is kind of important towards the end. I'm not going to give spoilers at the end. In fact, I specifically stopped this video about a half hour in because I wanted to get some of the more beautiful scenery of the cave, but I wanted to stop it before you hit the first major spoiler of the plot. And but basically, you're dropped on this island. You're a camera. You're a first-person camera with a flashlight. That's literally all you are. And your goal in the game is, you can see it right now, the radio tower. Your goal in the game is to make your way to the radio tower and climb up it. But you don't know that's your goal. I mean, the game kind of guides you in that direction, but there's nothing explicit that's like, objective unlocked, reach the radio tower, you know, or anything like that.
This guy owns a lot of paint buckets, by the way.
Well, one of the things that
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit.
It's a long one.
A holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form.
I like listening to these, but I'm
Allegedly,
going to talk
he
over
rode
this one.
here
I'm
from
sorry,
the
because it's about 8
mainland
minutes
in a boat
long.
without a bottom, so all the creatures of the
One of the
sea
plot
could
points
rise
is
at
that
night
the
to converse with him.
person
disappointed
who's
he must have been
narrating
with
these
that
text
chapter.
boxes was on the island
Perhaps
before
now
you,
all
or
the
maybe
fools
you
feel
are
the same
him.
as the rubbish
There's actually a
dumped
few
from the
different
tankers
interpretations.
provides more peace.
But that
They say he
person
threw his arms wide in
painted
the
a
valley on the
lot
south side,
with
and the cliff opened up to
fluorescent
provide him
green
shelter.
paint.
They say he died of fever
Yeah, and I noticed
years
there's
later.
chemical symbols
The
in
shepherds left gifts for him
the
at
previous
mouth of the
shack
cave,
you were
but
in.
Donnelly records they never claimed
Well,
to have
you'll
seen
see
him.
a few themes
I have
of
visited the
imagery,
cave
and
and
one
I
of them
have
is
left
chemical
my gifts.
symbols and
Like
how they
them,
fit together, and
I
another one
appear
is
to be an
circuit
unworthy
diagrams,
subject
and then
of
sometimes they
solitude.
combine in interesting and surprising ways.
Mm.
So, that is that long text. One thing I should mention, oops, ouch. And Rand just kind of noticed this by accident earlier when I screwed up the recording. But the narration is actually different on each playthrough. Each one of those little narratives, when the narrator reads out something, they recorded multiple versions of those, and it gives them to you basically randomly for each playthrough. And also, I think it kind of shuffles the order you get them in. So this game does have some replayability. Now, what isn't shuffled is the landscape. I mean, the island's always the same, and the paths you can travel are always the same. Although there are about 3 or 4 different ways you can make your way to the radio tower. They all kind of converge. It's separated into like 5 different loading chapter areas.
When
They
you
all
were born,
converge.
your mother told me, a hush fell over the delivery room. A great red birthmark covered the left side of your face. No one knew what to say, so you cried to fill the vacuum. I always admired you for that you cried to fill whatever vacuum you found. I began to manufacture vacuums, just to enable you to deploy your talent. The birthmark faded by the time you were 6, and had gone completely by the time we met, but your fascination with the empty and its cure remained.
Yeah, I love these. That's where we fell down, by the way. I think you can actually walk across it if you do it right. But another thing to mention in this game, interactive story, whatever you want to call it, is that you actually can't die. Well, first of all, the level designers do a pretty good job of making sure you can't
Donnelly
die.
by the weak afternoon sunlight. He landed on the south
And
side.
secondly,
followed the path to the bay and climbed the
if you
mount.
do get in a
Did not find
situation where
caves,
you're basically
and he did
trapped
not
or
chart
actually
the north
you're
side.
dying,
think this is why his understanding of
which
the island
exists
is
because this is using
complete.
the source
stood on
engine.
the
And of
mound
course, the
and
source
only
engine
wondered
has built-in ways to
momentarily
die,
how
like
to
if you
say.
drown and stuff like that.
But then, he didn't find
You
it.
basically respawn at exactly the point before you got into the unwinnable situation, and there's a ghostly voice that says, "Come back, come back." Anyway, I don't think that's in this video, but it's pretty cool.
So, how often does this guy just randomly talk out of curiosity?
Well, you have to remember that this game doesn't have, I mean,
When
it
someone
doesn't have
had
us.
died or was dying,
So
everyone gave up wondering
they fill the
about
sound
sacrifice.
silence. Good
They
music,
cut
though.
parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boat, and notice end aid.
So this
or
takes
impose a
place
cordon of
in
protection.
New England somewhere.
Wait a generation.
This
until
place takes
whatever
place in England,
pestilence stalked the
somewhere.
cliff path
And the
died along with its
Hebrides
hosts.
island chain, I'm saying
My
that
lines are just
totally
for this.
wrong. Pretty sure
Keeping
that's in
would-be
the UK,
rescuers
but
at bay.
it's basically a
Infection is not
tiny
simply
little
a
island
fact.
that was being used for sheep herding, but as he gives the history of the island as he narrates, and it's not it's not like the history of the island is that aliens landed here and they were covered up or anything ridiculous like that. The history is that there was a guy who was a shepherd who landed here and he lived here for a long time, and then there was another guy who wrote the history of the island, and this guy's read his book.
And then
he
there was
talks
another
about it.
guy who erected a mini Stonehenge.
We are not like lost.
Well, I mean, yeah.
We feel no particular need to turn back. There's nothing to be seen if we did. No tired old man parting the cliffs with his arms. No gifts or Bibles laid out on the sand for the taking. No tides turning or the shrieking gulls overhead. The bones of the hermit are no longer laid out for the taking. I have stolen them away to the guts of this island, where the passages all run to black, and where we can light each other's faces by their strange luminescence.
There was a hermit too who lived here, but what was I gonna say?
A lot of mini poems are not just well acted, but they're actually fairly well written overall.
It's really well acted, really well written. And one thing I would love to see, and I don't know, maybe some fan site has done this, but I'd actually love to see the
Dear
entire
Esther,
script of the game.
I met Paul.
Because like I said, there's like many
made my own
options for
little
all of these, and I'm not sure how
Like
many they
Damascus,
even
a
recorded,
small
because I always
semi-detached
hear a
on the
new one
outskirts
every
of
time I play it.
Wolverhampton.
Although I've only
We
played it like
drank
3
coffee
times,
in his
so,
kitchen,
to be fair.
tried to connect to one another.
There's a wrecked ship.
Although he knew I hadn't come in
Yeah,
search of an
you'll see his
apology,
dialogue is
reasonable
very
retribution. He still
British-centric,
spiraled
although
in
I'm not
panic,
sure if it
thrown
was
high and
actually
lifted by his own dented
made
body.
in the UK.
Responsibility had made him old.
One thing I'd like to point out in this game is that the graphics are fantastic. This is the source engine. This is the engine that powered Half-Life 2 and has barely been modified since. And I guess Left 4 Dead 2 made a few modifications, but seriously, it's an old-ass engine. And they got everything out of it. Like, they made it do its best work here. But whenever you see boulders, they have these weird flat edges on them. And it's such an obvious graphical glitch that I almost wonder if it's intentional, but then you think, like, why would they have done that? Anyway, when I started saying that, there were a bunch of them on the screen, but now I don't see the weird flat-edged boulders.
You didn't go towards the wrecked ship or the cave at all. You just kind of... You went in a
You'll
totally random
find-
direction, actually.
There's, despite the island looking like a big open world, there's only certain ways you can go. And you'll find more wrecked ships later on, so don't worry if you want to see wrecked ships. The interesting thing about the mini Stonehenge is that he never mentions it in any of his narratives. Yeah, so it's like, has it been here since, you know, the Bronze Age, or is it brand new? I mean, who knows? Obviously, it's not brand new, but you know what I mean. He did paint a diagram on the side, as you can see, as we approach it, which I think I stare at for a while. So the game's title is Dear Esther, and the reason that its title is Dear Esther is that frequently his narratives... Oh, that's, by the way, a Bible and a chemistry textbook. Frequently his narrative boxes or his narration recordings start with Dear Esther as if he's reading them out of a journal or out of a letter. So... Although the funny thing is, this playthrough, I don't think we've gotten a single Dear Esther.
No, we did. You talked over it just a minute ago.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not
The
trying
one,
to talk
the guy,
over them, but
it's
when he
right when
interrupts
you walk
me,
down that thing and you see the ship, and he's like, "Dear Esther, I met Paul," or something like that.
Okay, yeah. I would recommend playing this. If you have 2 monitors, turn off your second monitor and sit back and relax. There's no controls. You use the cursor keys on your keyboard and the mouse, and that's all there is. And it takes about, I mean, it depends on how fast you go through. It takes about an hour and a half, or maybe, yeah, you probably couldn't stretch it more than an hour 45 minutes to go through the game, and that's if you take all the pathways.
I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times.
I like this one.
But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my Ordnance Survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
So, you can actually probably start piecing together the plot just from what you've seen so far. A lot of the narrative boxes are about the history of the island, and all of the ones that are about Esther and the narrator, who I'm pretty sure doesn't ever get a name, are this continuing kind of romance story. So he's already had the one about Esther and her, when she was born, she had her, I want to say... Birthmark. I was going to say deformity, but that's not what I was looking for. I couldn't think of the word, damn it.
That's kind of you,
anyway,
yes.
birthmark, yeah, that went away by the time they met. And, he talks about how he intentionally goaded her to get her to do her best or whatever. And anyway, here's a good shipwreck for you. This is very stalker-esque. Kind of, but, it's kind of funny because whoever made the levels, there's it doesn't make sense as a shipwreck. I'm pretty sure there's more containers on the shore than could possibly have been in the ship. And every so often you'll see an object that doesn't fit. Like, I seem to remember, and maybe it's not in this video, but I seem to remember sometimes when you look in the shipwreck, which has obviously been here like 30 years, you'll see like a life preserver that's still perfectly bright red, like the game designers or the game developers forgot to age it. And they just kind of...
So the one thing about that last entry where he's talking about driving between the 2 points didn't make a lot of sense, because he's talking about driving on the M5 between Exeter and Bristol, but then he's talking about pulling...
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat.
Pulling ashore somewhere.
I like that one too. There must have been a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived? Anyway. Yeah, sorry.
Like
here's some of those
talking about this
edged
island,
rocks.
but then he's actually talking about the island while he's explaining his drive between 2 cities.
But that's part of the backstory that explains how he came to be on the island. The whole story between him and Esther is kind of the backstory on how he came to be on the island. And again, it's open. The nice thing I like about this game is that it's kind of like you build your own story based on the narration. And it's not force-fed to you, and you can fill in tons of gaps using your imagination. And like I said, you can actually interpret it that...
Stones, and you visited
this
me
is a
in
good
the
one
hospital.
too. Sorry, they're all
After
good,
the
but...
operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
So, again, you're probably getting an idea of what happened to Esther and what kind of kicks off the island trip. The references to trying to find the exact spot on the freeway and the car of a drunk, you know what I mean?
Yep,
So,
gotcha.
Read between the lines, man. Read between the lines.
Yep, I got it.
Anyway, but again, it's great because it's really open-ended. And like I said, one of the possible interpretations is that as you're playing through this game, you are the narrator playing through this game. And what you're listening to is your own memories coming to the surface as
I've
you're
begun
walking
my
the
ascent
island.
on the windless slope of the western side. The setting sun was an inflamed eye squeezing shut against the light shone in by the doctors. My neck is aching through constantly craning my head up to track the light of the aerial. I must look downwards, follow the path under the island to a new beginning.
This is the shepherd's house, the shepherd who lived here. And this is kind of weird music, by the way. But this is one of the first mentions of the aerial. So this is like, I mean, we're like 15 minutes in, and this is like the first time you get any idea of what you're supposed to be doing. That said, the game kind of handholds you. Like, there's only so many paths you can follow, and you always eventually end up at the aerial no matter what you do. But it's not like You know, it doesn't just tell you what to do.
Well, unless you decide to run circuits around the island, go up one path and then back out the other.
They block them off with, like,
The
you know...
bothy was constructed originally
or
in the early
walls.
1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians.
Migratory.
He was
Love
not
that.
considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either.
I would like to mention, because I'm kind of a pedantic jerk, but the white lines in the cliff thing makes no
When
sense.
the oil lamps ran out, I didn't pick
Nope.
up a torch, but used the moonlight to read by. When I've pulled the last shreds of silk,
But then again,
I
it
will
may be
throw
a
Donnelly's
cultural
on the
thing that we
desk
don't
there,
know about.
and
That
myself
is
with
Donnelly's
it.
book.
Maybe it will
A
wash
History
back
of the
up through
Island.
caves and erupt from the spring when the rain comes, making its return to the hermit's cave. Perhaps it will be back on the table when I wake. I think I may have thrown it into the sea several times before.
And you can see that someone has been spending a night here or time here. And the mug has chemical symbols on the side, although they've been professionally printed there and not painted with paint. Oh, and of course the seagulls. Yeah, the only life you really see on the island is seagulls. And that's important later, but I don't want to give too many spoilers.
Here's my theory on the story. This is
Okay.
all a drug-induced coma before he commits suicide because he's lost his wife in a tragic accident.
Yeah, you know, sadly you picked up half of it. But we haven't even got to the drug part yet. Man, God, you're way ahead of the game. Yeah, but, you know, again, and it's kind of funny because if you got a different combination of narrative boxes, you might have come to a completely different theory. Like, if you got the narrative boxes that are all about the history of the island and not anything about his personal history, which is quite possible because they are randomized, then you might come to a completely different theory about what's happening in the game.
Possibly.
But, I mean,
I don't know. For me, it was the whole, like, this is so disconnected from what happened in reality, like, hinting at the, you know, his car died in a crash and the island really has nothing to do with anything, and there's a bunch of chemical symbols all over the place.
it's interesting because there's also a lot of references to Damascus, which is funny because I haven't read the biblical story and I really should because I don't know the background of that. But the chemical symbols are more like just general insanity instead of any kind of, you know, it's not like the chemicals represent the drugs he took. Although maybe maybe they do. I don't know. I'm not a chemist.
Usually that is representing some type of substance,
In a
right?
footnote, the editor comments that at this point, Donnelly was going insane as syphilis tore through his
Like a
system
drunk
like
driver.
drunk driver. He's not to be trusted. Many of his claims are unsubstantiated, and although he does paint a colourful picture, much of what he says may have been derived directly from his fever. But I've been here, and I know, as Donnelly did, that this place is always half imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Even the rocks and caves.
Did you hear my cat meowing just then?
With the right
No,
eye.
I didn't.
Oh. Well, damn it, now I mentioned it for nothing. Quality work we're doing here. She got lonely and needed petting.
They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been
Anyway,
dead nearly 7 months.
Yeah, see, right
his
now he's
body
giving a
had
lot
been
of the history of the
frozen right
island.
down
So
to
there's
the
a
nerve,
lot
and
of
had not
different.
even
I mean,
begun
each
to
of the
be
characters that lived on the island, and there were only like a couple at any given time who didn't really interact with each other. It's just like one guy would come and try sheep herding, and another guy was Jacobson, and I don't think he was the same as the sheep guy.
Even the
But,
animals shunned
and then there was the hermit, who's only
The
referred to
mainlanders
as the
thought to
hermit, if I
bring home
remember
alive.
right. And then, of course, there's Donnelly, who wrote the history of all these people and may have been insane the entire time. So maybe none of them existed. But, I mean, the funny thing is that the island is obviously occupied and the radio tower on top is obviously maintained. As you get closer to it, you see they've been making paths that go up there that have been really recently, you know, painted and maintained and stuff like that. So there's some more of those weird angled rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's a Half-Life 2 engine thing.
It
Climbing
might
down
be.
to the
I
caves,
mean,
I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
So, and also lit candles, which, I mean, if this was a more video game, I'd just call that a video game trope. You know what I mean? Like, it's when you're in Fallout 3 and it's post-apocalyptic, you can go into a building and the lights are still turned on.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, wait a minute. Or like when you're in, like, Oblivion or
into the butthole of the
Skyrim.
world.
When you're Oblivion or Skyrim and you're in a dungeon that's filled with nothing but corpses that have been dead for 800 years, and yet they're still burning torches, and you're like, wait a minute. This,
Yeah.
I think, is actually supposedly recently lit by someone, you know.
From here, this
So-
last time, I have understood there is no turning back. The torch is failing along with my resolve. I can hear the singing
Here you
of the
are
sea
in the butthole of
creatures
the world.
from the passages above
Oh,
me,
thank you
and
for
they
that.
are promising the
And the torch is a
return of
flashlight
the
because he's British.
So what I was gonna ask though is that part he was talking about where he was wandering up to the bothy after having gotten a horrible femur problem or whatever the hell happened.
Yeah.
It
bone
almost seems as though he's talking from the perspective of the sheep herder that he was just talking about in the third person.
broken. Again, I think that they purposefully leave a lot about the story up to interpretation. And so one of the things I really like about this is, have you ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey? And I think the answer is no, but I'm asking anyway.
Yeah, I have. We've talked about that before.
Oh. And the last, like, 2/3 of the movie, nothing is spelled out as to what happens. And some of the plot points are really clear if you think about them, like the reason Hal goes insane and stuff, yada yada. But, like, a lot aren't. And I really love that kind of filmmaking because it makes it a more personal experience because it's, you are, you know, co-writing this film. Like, you are coming up, whoops, sorry, that's my mouse bug. You are coming up with this story. I don't know, I'm a big fan of works like that, and this is definitely one of them. And these caves are gorgeous. Like, this is some of the most beautiful scenery I've seen in a video game. One of the games I constantly rave about is BioShock 2, and no one gets it, because everyone's like, well, BioShock 2, that's not that great. And the one thing about BioShock 2 I love is because it has these great levels where you're walking, you're in a diving suit, you're one of the big brothers, or whatever they're called.
It was as if someone had taken the car and shaken it like a cocktail.
You're walking on the bottom of the ocean
The glove
between
compartment
these,
had
like,
been opened
buildings
and
that are
filled
built
with
on the
the
bottom of
ashtrays
the
on the roof.
ocean, and it's the most
It made for a
beautiful
crumpled
moment.
museum.
And you get in one of those
Shattered
levels, and you
exhibition.
just want to stop and just look around. And I get that feeling from this game, too, which is great, because that's all this game is. It's the part where you stop and look around and just relax and just explore. And, I mean, I have so many of my favorite games have that mechanic. Like, I love the Elder Scrolls games because Elder Scrolls games are always, whenever they're released, they're always top of the line graphically, and they always have these great, there's no force, there's no time, there's no soldiers that come after you. You could just stop and you could look around and explore for as long as you like, and I just love that type of gameplay. And, you know, that's what Dear Esther is, like, 89% of the time. And these caves are just gorgeous. I mean, the only complaint I could possibly make is that, unlike, you know, Elder Scrolls, there's only really one way you can go in this game. There's only about, like I said, maybe 5 different paths, and they all end up in the same places. And you can see whenever the screen turns black, it does its loading thing, which again is another concession to the Source engine. It does not stream in data well. You can see where those paths intersect because those loading points are all where the paths intersect. But I don't know. I just graphically I love this game. There's no oxygen meter in case you were wondering.
Man, yet you can still drown.
You also don't slip on this, which I would imagine would be extraordinarily slippery.
Probably.
The water flowing down the mud there. There's no way you can just walk up that smoothly. Come on, game. Jeez. So unrealistic.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
They did a pretty good job with the circular lichen patterns on the wall, though.
Yeah, and like a lot of this, like this cave doesn't exist. I mean, come on. This is obviously like a theme park cave, but it's so well done. It's like I can't complain. It just looks great. But it's like there's no place on Earth where there's an island this size in the middle of the ocean and there's a cave like this under it.
Nope.
Come on. But
I mean, really, so there are caves like this that do exist, so...
yeah, in South America on continents.
Yeah, exactly.
not in little islands in the, the UK or whatever.
This is where you would die in real life, by the way, and just fall off.
Again, yeah, there's no way you could keep a grip on this flowing water under your feet while you're walking here.
Yeah, that is probably covered in algae and all kinds of other stuff.
So you can see we're kind of following the path of candles. That get more common as we get to the end of the path. One thing I should do, like I said, I played through this like 2 or 3 times. Oh, this game was originally a freeware mod for Half-Life 2 Orange Box, by the way. And so the first time I played through it, it was actually in mod form, which was almost extremely similar, except for it was really ugly. Like, the mod was obviously just a mod that used existing Half-Life assets and just rearranged them to make the island. And I think all of the development time spent on actually making it a product was all in the art department, because I don't think they even re-recorded the audio or anything. I think it was all just creating these beautiful graphics.
Well, if the audio was already this good, then...
Yeah, I mean, what would be the point of re-recording it? Like, you couldn't find a better actor. It's great. And the other thing I like about this game is it's minimalistic.
If the caves are my guts,
like there's
this is a massive cave.
Stones are first formed. The bacteria phosphoresce and rise, singing through the tunnels. Everything here is bound by the rise and fall, like a tide.
Mentioned.
Yeah,
Perhaps
no
the
kidding.
whole island is actually underwater.
I wish that the reason I only recorded the first half hour, like I said, this game is only like an hour, maybe an hour 45 if you go through the whole thing. But it's very replayable. I mean, I think anyone playing this will want to do it at least twice. But it's so tempting just to record the whole thing and put it up on YouTube. But, to be honest, I think the commentary kind of ruins it, and it's more an experience that I think you kind of need to experience for yourself. And it's not expensive, and it's on Steam, so you can get it and download it. It's like a couple, I don't even think, it's like a gig and a half or something. It's not even big. So you guys should all, like, buy this. Spend the $15 or whatever it's up at right now, and buy this game. And it's not going to be like a 20-hour RPG that will keep you occupied for weeks. It's going to be something you'll play, 4 hours maybe at most. But if you're like me at all, you're going to enjoy every minute of it. And if you are, stressed out, if you're coming back from a hard day at work, if you just really want to do something on, like, I don't know, lonely night or something that feels more meaningful than just sitting around and browsing the internet, you could do a lot worse than playing Dear Esther.
This is badass, I want to point out. The geode.
This cannot be the shaft they threw the goats into. It cannot be the landfill where the parts of your life that would not burn ended up. It cannot be the chimney that delivered you to the skies. It cannot be the place where you rained back down again to fertilize the soil and make small flowers in the rocks.
Yeah, I love it. Although, again, this cave could not possibly exist. Come on. I had to jump in there just to see if that was just the reflection or if it actually was that deep, but it's all the reflection. Oh, you can start seeing some circuit diagrams.
Well, there's also a lot of neurons that showed up in that previous longer cave section.
Yeah, as you get closer to the end, you'll find that the number of candles increases, or at least lit candles. I think you can find unlit candles all through the game. The number of paintings on the caves and cliffs and rocks increases. Every so often, every once in a while,
what does
you
that
have this
say, by the way?
Moment. Damascus rises, or something about Damascus. Sorry, I didn't read it. I mean, I read it when I first recorded this, but I don't remember it now. This cave is so beautiful. I just love this. But every so often, you'll get a glimpse in the distance of somebody else. And it just gives you a shiver down your spine. And it happens rarely. Like, this entire playthrough I recorded this did not happen. And it's not like a stupid ghost story. It's like, ooh, it jumps out at you and scares you. It's just, you'll be looking at the landscape, and just far in the distance, you'll just see the hint of movement. And you'll see there's someone there or something there that's alive and moving other than a seagull, which is the only living thing you see other than that, which is interesting. So, I mean, it's just these really, really great... I'm going to
call paranoia on that, but yeah.
It might be, but that's the great thing, is it puts you in this great mood. That, even if it is, it's still... I mean, the point of art is to provoke an emotional reaction, right? So that's what you want. That's the good stuff. Anyway.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. This game is fantastically well done.
Oh, by the way, that paint is underwater. I don't know how it sticks there.
Or how
And
you painted it there in the first place.
I'm always a jerk and have to point out errors in textures or missing textures and stuff like that. This game has very few. It's rock stable, of course, like I said, it's the Half-Life 2 engine, so it should be rock stable by now. I've never seen it crash, but every so often, well, I already mentioned, like, the things that look too new, like the art department didn't properly age it up to match the setting. So, this is where I cut it off, because if I went any further than this, it would give you kind of spoilers to the ending. And like I said, the reason I'm giving you this preview of the game, the reason we're doing this is because I want you to buy this game, and I want you to support this type of game so we get more in the future. I'm a big fan. And I think it just cuts off like that.
I think you should put the last 10 seconds of that on loop and just enjoy the sound of the waterfall. Let it caress your dreams.
Should I put that as one of those annoying YouTube 10-hour waterfall from Dear Esther videos?
Yep.
No.
White noise for sleeping?
No. Anyway, thanks for listening to my fanboy gushing over Dear Esther. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you go out and buy the game. It's good stuff. Trust me.